In the 90s, 3D was a huge deal for video games, and by the time the PlayStation and N64 came out, it was hard to sell any titles that played in 2D. It's one of the reasons the Saturn had so much trouble even scraping third place. I mean, you've got to understand that going from the roaming freedom of Super Mario 64 back to being stuck on 2 axes of movement is like discovering fire and then a rainstorm starting up. Don't get me wrong, I love 3D games just as much as the next guy, but it's a shame that some classics got overshadowed during this era, like Mischief Makers, Klonoa, Door to Phantomile, and Tombi in particular. Tombi is a side-scrolling open-world platformer action RPG hybrid created for the PlayStation by a group of developers known as Whoopee Camp, led by Tokaru Fujiwara of ex-Capcom fame. Critically acclaimed, yet only well-known within more die-hard gaming circles, this game and its sequel were the only 2 offerings released by this developer before they dissolved due to poor sales of their 2D-focused games in a market that valued 3D more at the time. And for the record, yes, I am aware that this game had a different title and a different name for the titular protagonist outside of Europe, but I grew up with Tombi, and so he will always be Tombi to me. So if you're okay with that, let's jump right in. This here is Tombi himself, a pink-haired feral child. He can jump, throw weapons, and climb up walls fairly easily, and if you land on an enemy, he'll bite down on them before chucking them off in another direction with another jump. Straightforward, right? It seems so until the revelation comes that in certain, rather obvious locations, you can hop between a background layer and foreground layer, and in other places you can even rotate the world around you. The 2D mechanics applied to a 3D space really set Tombi aside from other platformers of the time, and while they can seem a bit cumbersome at first, you'll find them a total breeze in no time. In fact, the general mechanics are for the most part extremely satisfying. Upgrading and equipping different items and pants really give you a nice sense of progression, and ledge grabbing, swinging from poles and chaining together leaps from enemy to enemy make for very fun platforming, aside from a few areas like Phoenix Mountain and the lava caves where precision platforming can be an issue, but there is an item that alleviates those gripes a little bit. The opening FMV sets up the plot quickly. Tombi's minding his own business when he notices some evil pigs robbing a farmer. He hurls himself into the action, only to be knocked out by a falling tree branch and have his grandfather's bracelet stolen from him by the pigs. After that, he sets out on an adventure to retrieve it. Fairly simple to begin with, but grows more and more complex as the events unfold. You find out that 7 magical evil pigs came and transformed the lands into warped versions of themselves and collect gold as the source of their powers, hence why they took your grandpa's bracelet. Before you know it, you're on a cross-country adventure to find and defeat the pigs and return the world to order while meeting and helping folks along the way. While I am oversimplifying the story by a huge amount in that summary, I couldn't really say much more without spending all day on it. Tons of roadblocks and tangential errands will stand between you and your goal of finding and defeating the evil pigs, and while for the most part it's relatively easy to follow the chain of events for a single quest, sometimes it can be difficult to tell which ones actually lead to progress on the main storyline and which are there simply as little bonuses. Not to mention that at a couple of points it can be quite hard to even figure out where to go at all, since the only guidance for finding the evil pigs comes from 2 extremely vague fortune tellers. Some quest solutions are obvious, but the manner in which others are completed can be difficult to glean from the problems posed to you. For example, in the part where one has to collect leaf butterflies, only 25 can actually be found in the dwarf forest, and the remaining 4 are actually to be found in the Masakari jungle. But nothing indicates when there are none left in the forest, and you can fall into the trap of spending a long time looking for more leaf butterflies there to no avail. You found 25 of them there, so why would they just suddenly stop being there? And what makes this worse is that a couple of quests in particular are very easy to lock yourself out of permanently and make it impossible to complete the game 100%. However, this seems less like a malicious move and more like a genuine oversight on part of the developers. There are 130 of these in total after all. Apart from those things, there's a lot to enjoy here. The gorgeous pixel art meshes wonderfully with the polygonal backgrounds to create a distinct and charming look that's unparalleled, and the environments are distinct enough from each other that you never get confused about where you are, even when navigating the haunted mansion, which can get a little daunting. Add on to that the differences before and after each area is freed from the evil pig's corrupting spells, and you have a recipe for a title with a ton of visual flair and charisma. I'm fairly sure I could spot if somebody's playing Tombi from half a mile away, and if the looks aren't enough to deal with, every location station is chock full of stuff to do, 130 events, as the game calls them and I mentioned previously, over 7 main areas will do that. And even when you think you're done with a section, you usually aren't. Some would call it backtracking, but by the time you get a particular fast travel enabling item for use at any point, it's a nice and quick trip, and a real treat to see new stuff you had no idea was there before. When I was a kid, I had no idea that you could enter the house in the Village of All Beginnings later on in the game and meet the witch who lived inside, for example. However, Tombi's sound design isn't quite as strong, albeit still commendable. It aids the overall atmosphere. While a lot of the tunes that appear earlier are complete classics that will stay with me till the day I die and the sound effects are etched into my brain, some tunes are either slightly too short or the sound font they're played in just makes them ever so slightly grating. Not to the point where it becomes a major issue, but after 3 or 4 playthroughs, it's become increasingly noticeable and I feel I might change my mind on that later. Another thing that's becoming increasingly noticeable across multiple playthroughs is just how easy the boss fights in this game are, if they can even be called that. What are supposed to be climactic confrontations with the evil pigs themselves end up being seconds-long tokens of what should be in their place. And I honestly find seeing the FMVs of the worlds being uncursed and the definitive markers of progress far more fulfilling than the actual feeling of beating a challenge. It's rather anticlimactic, in fact, when the 7 Friends quest directly before the final boss is more difficult than the final boss itself. So with all that said, what's my final verdict? While nostalgia is okay, it's important not to let it cloud your judgment. That's why I've put off reviewing this for 4 years, but I can definitely say that Tombi is a brilliant game even without my personal feelings towards it, and it still holds up as one of the highlights of the PlayStation's library. But it isn't flawless. An obtuse quest system, vague clues, pathetic boss fights, and a few moments that will make you yell, "How the hell was I meant to figure that out?" hold it back in some respects. Regardless, I feel even now that Tombi doesn't quite get enough praise despite the ludicrous price tag on the original copy, and that Whoopi Camp's legacy needs to be played by more people. But hey, that's what PSN is for, isn't it?